Okay, so this slide gives you another example of stress patterns, right? Word stress in words that have more than one syllable. So here you can see that this represents, this little image here that I'm pointing at with my mouse, it represents the stress pattern of all of these examples of words below. So there are 3 syllables, and the middle syllable is the least stressed. So there are 2 stress parts. So I'm going to say them for you and try and find if you can identify that stress pattern. Try again. Not enough. Look inside. Show me yours. Do it now. Not so fast. Lend a hand. Cut the bread. Make the tea. Run away. Go to sleep. Have a drink. Drive a car. Break it up. Notice how it's strong stress, weak stress, strong stress. Okay, and then let's contrast that with the second series, where the stress pattern, and I'm pointing to it right now with my mouse, is equal across. So come here, look out, what for, where to, and notice how each of these are usually 2 words. And each of those words is 1 syllable. And so you can expect that in 1 syllable words, you're not going to have a pattern that looks like this. Instead, if we go back up to this group of words, where there is a weaker stress in between, that weak stress is contained within 1 word. So in the first one, try again has 2 syllables. And you can tell that again, the second syllable has the stress, right? Again. Or enough. Word stress also works on the phrase level. So let's see how we can change the stress of the words that we choose in this phrase and the way in which it modifies the meaning. So we have the same sentence here represented 5 times, right? Carla's leaving Paris next week. But depending on the part of the sentence that you stress, it changes the meaning, right? So if I say, Carla is leaving Paris next week, what you can tell is that I'm emphasizing time. And so what seems to be important or notable within that sentence is the timing, right? The next week piece. This is different if I'd say, Carla is leaving Paris next week, right? So then you get this idea that, oh, okay, there are many different places she could be leaving from, but Paris is the key place. The same thing with Carla is leaving Paris next week, or Carla is leaving to Paris next week, or Carla is leaving to Paris next week, right? So depending on what word you emphasize in the phrase, it changes the meaning slightly. And this is another component that I would like you to look for in your oral language samples. See if your ELLs are emphasizing a particular word within the context of a phrase on purpose and how it changes the meaning. This is very different to looking for the stress within a word that has more than 1 syllable. Okay? So within word stress, I want you to do both of those things. Look at stress in the context of a phrase, see if there's one particular word that the person is stressing for meaning, and also look within words that have more than 1 syllable and see if the person is emphasizing or stressing the correct syllable. Okay, so now we're going to move on to English intonation. This intonation is basically talking about the melody of the language, okay? And in particular, it's very much focused on the endings of phrases, whether they rise or whether they fall. So I'm going to state these 2 sentences for you, okay? And I'll have you try and detect what the difference is in the way that the 2 sentences sound. So the first one is, he is going tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to say it again for you. Listen closely and listen to the end of that sentence. He is going tomorrow. Okay, would you classify that ending as a rising ending or a falling ending? He is going tomorrow. So hopefully you stated falling, right? You can tell that it's falling. My voice ends, the melody of my voice ends on a low note. Now, notice how this is different in the second sentence. He is going tomorrow. I'm going to say it again. He is going tomorrow. So first of all, without even looking at the video where I've written these sentences, notice that you understand I'm asking a question, right? He is going tomorrow. And this is because the sentence ends on a rising tone, right? So these two sentences are very different because of the intonation patterns included in both. He is going tomorrow versus he is going tomorrow. So what we can say is the melodies of the two sentences are different, right? Sentence A drops, sentence B rises. And so all spoken languages have intonations. And what these two intonations mean are that the sentences that end with the falling, right? For example, he is going tomorrow. What they indicate when it ends in a falling tone is that it's complete, or I am very certain about what I'm saying. There's no question involved. There's sort of a definiteness or a completeness about it. And the types of sentences that use this tone are ordinary statements, like the one I showed you, WH questions, commands, and also exclamations. Okay, this is different to the rising tone, right? The rising tone was, he is going tomorrow. And that rising tone, what it does is it indicates uncertainty, either incompleteness, or also if you're trying to be polite. And this type of tone is used for yes-no questions, for statements that are intended as questions, as that example was, he is going tomorrow, and statements that are intended to be soothing or encouraging, or also the repetition of questions. So in your oral language analysis, what you're going to be looking for is the intonation of speakers' voices while they speak, and identifying if they use rising, falling, or rising tones appropriately. Right? Do they mean to indicate definiteness or completeness? Do they mean to indicate uncertainty? Are they meaning to ask a question? We'll look at that together. So I'm going to test out your ability to see if you can identify if the right answer. Okay, so depending on the intonation. So if I was going to ask this question, so the person A says, I'm going to California next week, and person B can ask can say where in two different ways. They can say it using a rising, falling intonation, or they can say it using a rising intonation. So the first way I'm going to say it is by using a rising, falling intonation. Okay? Listen closely. I'm going to California next week. Where? San Francisco. So the answer there is San Francisco because my tone did not rise. My tone fell. And so I was not asking a question about to have the person repeat themselves, right? I wasn't sort of uncertain about what was said. What I wanted to know was more information. So let's do that again. I'm going to California next week. Where? San Francisco. Instead, if I were to say, if the person was going to say, I'm going to California next week, and I say, where? Then they understand that I haven't understood what they've said, and so they repeated California. Let's do another one. We're moving to New York next month. When are you moving? On the 15th. Okay, so notice that when are you moving had a falling tone. Now I'm going to read it again and see if you can notice how the answer would change because my intonation of that question changes. We're moving to New York next month. When are you moving? Next month. Do you notice? Let's do one more. A couple more. I bought that rug in Mexico. Where? In Merida at an outdoor market. I bought that rug in Mexico. Where? In Mexico. Do you notice the difference in the intonation? The first where was a falling tone. The second where was a rising tone. That first tone, that first where with the falling tone showed that I was certain about what the person had said. There was no sort of uncertainty on my part. I just wanted more information. The second one, where I said where, showed that I was not sure about what the person had said. Right? And so the person repeated in Mexico. Same thing. I tried to call you last night. When? around 9 o'clock. I tried to call you last night. When? Last night. Okay, so hopefully you can tell the difference, and that's what you're going to be looking for in your oral language analyses. So let's review some of the definitions. Okay, intonation. Remember that intonation is a variation of spoken pitch that is used to indicate attitudes and emotions. Right? There's two. We just covered it: rising and rising, falling. You can think about it as the melody of the language. Okay, and it shows the difference between statements and questions. Okay, rhythm is different. Rhythm is like the beat of the language. Okay, so when you think about rhythm, think about the beat. And remember that there are two types of rhythms. There is stress-timed, which is English, and there is syllable-timed, which is languages like Mandarin or Spanish. And so remember that we went over this phrase, la pronunciación es importante, which every syllable had about the same stress. This is very different in English, where we have multi-syllable words, where one syllable of those words is going to get more stress. So listen to this. Pronunciation is important. So notice, hopefully you could hear that one syllable of each of those multi-syllabic words was stressed. Okay, and then word stress is a little bit different in that you're going to be looking at individual words rather than the rhythm across the sentences. So remember, in rhythm we were talking about phrases, right? And you're looking at the beat. You're not looking at the stress in one particular word. You're looking at the beat. So when you're looking for rhythm in your ELL's oral language samples, you have to be listening for at least 5 to 10 seconds to establish what the beat sounds like. Okay? For word stress is very different. You're going to be looking at single words, individual words, and especially words that have more than one syllable to see if the person stresses the syllable correctly. The other thing that you're going to look for is to see if the ELL emphasizes one word more than any other word for meaning's sake. So, for example, Carla is leaving Paris, or Carla is leaving Paris. Right? The meaning now changes because of this sort of overemphasis of one word. And then remember, you're going to be looking at multisyllabic words, for example, leaving, and seeing if the student is putting the stress on the right syllable. In this case, leave, right? That first syllable. Okay, so now we are going to try apply our phonological knowledge to the linguistic analysis. And what I'd like you to do is click on this link. It's going to start a video of a German girl who's going to introduce herself a little bit to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this playing in the background, and you can follow along with the transcript on the PowerPoint itself. So you'll see here the transcript.
Hi guys, today I want to ask you how you think my English is. I'm from Germany, I'm 70 years old and I'm still going to school. I want to know about how my English is, my grammar and my pronunciation. In school I got a lot of spelling mistakes, but I think that's normal. Yeah. 2 years ago I was in America, in Alabama, but I could hardly understand those people because they spoke that fast. And
okay, so if we go back to the PowerPoint a second, you'll see that she continues to go through, and here's the transcript of what she says. And so once you've listened to this, there are a couple of components that you need to fill out for your language analysis project. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to model this for you right now using this clip of the German girl speaking English. And then in the next session, you're going to go through a workshop where I'll be helping you describe and analyze and talk through your analysis of another ELL's English. So in this first box, and this is the table that you will be filling out for the oral language analysis, you're going to talk about the clarity of her ideas and use these questions as a guiding sort of points for you to talk about. So what was the content of her speech? You might want to sort of summarize what she has to say. How did the speaker choose to begin and end? Just notice sort of how it is that she gets into the topic, what she says at first, how does she end, and also her organization of points as she goes through. So what did she actually talk about and in which order? And include your evaluations on those points. For overall intelligibility, this is about how comprehensible she was in general. If she were, what words and sentences were clear to understand, and if there are any words in particular that you found difficult to understand. Okay, so the first part, after you sort of fill out this introduction, the first part of this table talks about the accomplishments of the individual. And you'll notice that on the side there's intonation, rhythm, word stress, consonant articulation, and vowel articulation. And these are the sort of 5 categories that we have studied and we've gone through today in the phonology PowerPoint. So remember, intonation is about the melody of the language. And in particular, we talked about rising intonation and rising falling intonation. So when you listen to that video again, you're trying to figure out examples that showcase how she is able to use intonation correctly. Meaning, she uses rising intonation for questions, she uses rising falling intonation for statements. So after having listened to that clip several times, and it's going to take several times because you're listening for different things each time, you might come across some examples of appropriate use of intonation. And so writing it up might look something like this. She uses rising falling intonation appropriately most of the time. So I've made a judgment there of sort of the extent to which she is able to use intonation correctly. For example, and now I'm listing an example, which is very important because I do want you to list examples and talk through those examples using your terminology. When she states, "I'm from Germany, I'm 17 years old, and I'm still going to school," she uses rising falling intonation at each ending of her phrase. So it falls on Germany, it falls on old, and it falls on school. And then I describe why this is appropriate. This is correct because this information she is sure about. This is information that she's sure about and which requires the rising falling intonation pattern. Okay, so then we get to rhythm. And one more thing, this is just an example of what you would write for intonation. You would include many more examples, at least 3 to 4 examples, and talking through each one using your terminology, okay? For the purposes of this sort of me modeling this activity for you, I'm limited in space on my table in this PowerPoint, but in reality, the table that you will be turning in will be much more comprehensive with a lot more information and examples. Okay, let's talk about rhythm. So you would go back and listen to that oral language clip again of the German girl. And this time you are paying attention to the beat, right? The beat of her speech. So after listening and trying to find examples of her using stress timing, which is the beat that we use in English, you'd write down those examples and talk through them. So it might look like something like this. She uses a stress-timed rhythm where she correctly stresses content words and does not add stress to functional words. For example, she states, and this would be where you would say,